Hello and welcome to another Innovation Explained video. If you're watching this, you probably know what a brainstorm is. Tons of people love it and think it's the best thing since sliced bread. Others hate it. Regardless, we can probably agree that tons of companies use brainstorming and do it all the time. Now the big question is, what if all of that has just been a massive waste of time? Study after study has proven that group brainstorming just doesn't work, at least for the intended purpose of improving creativity and generating lots of great ideas. Now let's next take a look at why that is and what we can instead do if we do want to generate more and better ideas. So let's start with a quick recap to see how it actually became such a popular creative method in companies worldwide. Brainstorming is a group ideation technique that has been around for decades. At its core, it's a face-to-face session where people get together to generate and contribute ideas around a specific theme or problem. Nowadays, the term is also used to refer to various other methods, tools, and techniques developed for similar purposes, but let's get back to that later. But how did brainstorming become such a prevalent activity? Well, it all started in the 50s, the early beginnings of the Mad Men era, when advertisers embraced creative techniques to reach consumers through aspirational ads, catchy slogans, and bold graphics. Well, modern marketing was really in its infancy when Alex Osborne came up with the brainstorming method. He first called it thinking up and used it in his agency BBDO, where he swore by it to generate as many ideas as possible together with his team. He then introduced it to the public in his 1953 book, Applied Imagination, and it soon took off. Fast forward 70 years, and now the typical day of an office worker looks pretty different. Yet, brainstorming is still as popular as ever, with ideas being generated on sticky notes, whiteboards, and these days online tools as well. But the outcomes just aren't there, and they've never really been. Because it's such a well-known method, there's been tons of research on the topic, and study after study, dating all the way back to the 50s, has found that individuals working on their own leads to more, as well as better ideas. And with free access to information within seconds, that's never been more true because there are now a lot of other sources for ideas than just your colleagues. And it's not just academia that knows this. Jake Knapp, the inventor of the design sprint method, realized after facilitating over 100 brainstorms at Google that none of the numerous ideas from any of those brainstorming sessions actually got implemented or launched. All the best ideas came outside those sessions, and frequently even from people who wouldn't even have participated in the sessions to begin with. So even if everybody was having a good time, it was still more or less just a massive waste of time. So let's dig into this and look at the two major issues with brainstorming. First, even if the session itself would be led by a strong facilitator, there's rarely a systematic process to drive results from those ideas. And when you don't have a process in place, it usually means that the goals aren't clearly set, communication is lacking, nobody continues to drive the ideas after the session, and overall there's just very little alignment with business goals or day-to-day processes. Now, the second part is team dynamics and its effects on human behavior. That has a great influence on the outcome of a brainstorm and is essentially always for the worse. There are a number of ways in which this is apparent, and these are all massive topics, so if you're interested in learning more about these, we've explained them in more detail in an article that I'll link to in the description. Now, with all the proof against brainstorming, why are people still doing it, and when you need good ideas, should you do something else entirely? Well, for the first question, the answer is simple. It feels like it's effective because you're all there together and ideas are flying around. Plus, tons of people simply enjoy it. Now, for the second question, the answer is a bit more nuanced, but it comes down to a couple of factors. First, how can you adapt traditional brainstorms to combat its shortcomings in your context? And two, how can you make the most of its side benefits, which we'll get to next. So, don't get discouraged, because brainstorming can still be very beneficial for your team. First of all, it can be a great way to improve communication and get people on the same page. It's also a very practical way to involve people in decision making, which helps you prioritize and get the buy-in needed for successful idea execution from your stakeholders. Plus, it's a fun activity that can energize and motivate many people. Now, originally brainstorming started with a set of rules meant to improve outcomes from the sessions. These 4 are still very much valid, but as they date back to a 50s ad agency, they're not really sufficient for most modern organizations and the way that brainstorming is used within these organizations. So we've upgraded them with the aim of helping you prepare and run a brainstorming session in today's world. Now the first is to turn brainstorming from a single group session to an asynchronous process. There are many benefits to this approach, but the biggest is the way that humans come up with ideas. It's by being exposed to other ideas and then having the time to process these. In a group session, you do get exposure to new ideas, but they likely aren't the most novel or diverse due to the dynamics that we've discussed before. Plus, you'll never have the time to really think about them, research, or otherwise work on these ideas. In addition, asynchronous processes make people's calendars less packed, leave freedom to do the work when and wherever you can be the most creative. And you can really only invite so many people to a physical workshop, whereas with an asynchronous process, there's virtually no limit. The more people, the more diverse ideas you're likely to get, and that again is the key to better results. To accomplish that in practice, you can move most of the brainstorming session online. That doesn't mean you wouldn't still arrange a meeting or workshop, just that most of the work will happen outside of that meeting, and that's what enables those better results. Now, this enables you to go beyond the physical barrier of simply arranging that workshop at the figurative ivory tower of your global headquarters, which again helps improve the diversity of the ideas you generate. Plus, those who are expected to contribute and generate ideas are given the time to look into the topic, research, and think it through at their own pace. Now, these days, idea management tools like Viima that have been designed for this purpose can help you save a lot of time and effort in preparing a brainstorming session, give the space and time for ideas to be formed, collect them, and then get together to debate, develop, and refine them. Now, the second rule is about encouraging all sorts of crazy ideas. The traditional way of doing this is to just say a few words of encouragement and then ask everybody for those wild ideas. The problem is that we rarely have those wild ideas when the boss demands it. In practice, the key enablers for creating this right environment are transparency, exposure to diverse ideas as we just discussed, and a physical environment and state of mind where you're relaxed. And as we touched in the previous point, these are rarely true in the traditional brainstorming session, but an asynchronous environment allows people to make that happen for themselves. Now, the third rule says that one should not criticize the ideas of others. Now, while that's great for keeping the flow of ideas going and absolutely should be encouraged early on in the process, those initial ideas are rarely all that good. So in practice, the best ideas require a bit of critical thinking and an ability to challenge your preconceived ideas. And to achieve that, you need to encourage a healthy debate. Collaboration isn't just about agreeing with others all the time. That creative abrasion has played a huge role in the success of numerous great leaders and their companies. Now, the bottom line is that the culture of your company should enable creative abrasion, which is defined by the ability to create a marketplace of ideas through debate and discourse. That means that people should feel safe to advocate for their point of view and disagree with their colleagues or superiors. Ideas should be challenged, and so should people. That's how we evolve. Now, an easy way to approach this is if you're facilitating a brainstorming session, just ask questions like, what happens if ... Have you thought of ... How might we ... Why do you think X is important? And the last rule then brings everything together. The traditional rule says that once you've generated and collected ideas, you should start combining and improving them, and that's definitely important. But that again brings us back to our earlier point of having an asynchronous process, so that when you do come together to discuss, debate, and find alignment, you're well prepared. The more flexible scheduling enables participants to reflect on ideas before contributing, which again leads to more creative and well thought out solutions and a much richer debate. Now, before we move on, don't get scared by the word process here. This doesn't mean that you should plan something massive and complicated, just a few simple steps with every participant given clear responsibilities within that process. To bring that into practice, we'll show you what that could look like. First things first, before your brainstorming session, decide on an ideation platform that is intuitive, easy to take into use, and flexible. The main thing is to make sure that it's effortless for everybody to come in and contribute. And that means that you can easily include different stakeholder groups in the process, use the tool both asynchronously online as well as in a live setting with one another. Now, once you have this in place, decide on a simple process. Again, keep it really simple. This will make it easier to know ahead of time who will be involved, who is responsible for what other resources and capabilities are required, and how you will communicate everything. That might sound like a lot of work, but using a good tool can really simplify the process, so I want to show you a quick example of how to do that in practice. Now, I'm obviously most familiar with Viima, so that's what I'll use in the following example, but there are also other good tools out there, and you could use those just as well, and the steps will be broadly the same. Anyway, with Viima, you can get started by choosing our brainstorming board template, and with a couple of clicks, you're already 80% of the way there. Now in Viima, each board is essentially one ideation process, and you can create as many as you want. So even organizing multiple brainstorms at once is a breeze. Now, once the board has been set up, there are still a few important things to consider. The three big ones here are the process, the visuals, and the communication. And you will likely want to make minor tweaks to some of these. Now, the key things to communicate are explaining the why behind the brainstorm, as well as the process for it. Let's first check the process. In our example, that is really simple. We collect ideas and evaluate them independently, then get together to debate them and make decisions and assign responsibility for implementation, which will then follow up on the same platform after the session. Now, once we have that process, it's time to communicate about the brainstorm for everyone involved. So here we'll first write a message about the why and the process, including deadlines, and then invite everybody to participate. The right communication channels depend on your culture, but often a combination of an email, calendar invite, and then some notifications from the digital platform can be a good starting point. Now, make sure the timeline allows people to actually spend some time working on the ideas and set clear expectations, like everybody having to submit at least 5 ideas to be able to participate in the actual workshop. As we've discussed, the benefit of allowing everyone time to reflect, and by exposing them to other people's ideas and maybe even asking for clarification prior to the workshop, allows them to think about the challenges in much more depth, which will lead to a healthier debate and better ideas down the road. Plus, having everything already on the same board makes comparison and evaluation a lot easier, as you can see here. Now, once you've got on the same page, it's time to make decisions and pick the ideas that you'll move forward with, and then assign responsibility for executing them. This is key to making sure that something actually happens to those ideas. Plus, the added transparency and automated status updates that a platform like this can offer are very helpful in keeping people accountable and for keeping everyone up to date. Anyway, that's about it for today. I hope this will be helpful in turning brainstorming into a properly proactive process for you. Now, if you do need to run a brainstorming session, you might want to check out Viima's board template for brainstorming. That's all completely free for you. I'll also add materials to all of the stuff we've discussed today in case you want to read more. And as usual, if you have any questions, please leave those in the comments below, and we'll see you again in the next one.